So there was some talk at the early part of the meeting about buy and hold and landlording and different people's strategies and stuff like that. So I think that's we kind of already have a primer for it. I brought a prop, but my prop is very small, and I'm betting that Stacy might help me out by telling you guys what my prop is. So, what did I bring with me today?
Monopoly pieces,
yes.
Houses and hotels.
That's right. So Parker Brothers had it right, however many decades ago. The trick to this business, in my opinion, is 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. I substitute apartment complex for hotel, and you guys can buy hotels or retail strip centers or whatever you want to do. But in my opinion, I like buy and hold. I like building an income for myself to retire off of one day. So I enjoy what I do, but I don't want to, 15 years from now, get up every morning having to leave the cave running 100 miles an hour to kill something, drag it home to eat it that night. I'd like to one day be able to wake up and go, this is a good day to stay on the couch. I don't really want to work today, and I'm just not done. So that's kind of my objection. I have been investing in some form or fashion since 2001. I've done flip deals. I've done buy and hold deals. We've been in the property management business as well. And what I'm here to share with you tonight is the top 10 mistakes that landlords make in property management. When Tim and I brainstormed ideas earlier today, you can imagine that I came up with more than 10, right? That wasn't hard to do. It's hard to kind of pare them down and focus in. But my number one on my list, and the number one piece of advice I would give to you, my number one mistake is assuming that the property will never be vacant and will never have maintenance expenses. So if you watch HGTV, or if you listen to the advice of people without experience in owning rental property and being a landlord, they put numbers together that look like, well, my mortgage payment is $1,000 a month, and my rent is $1,200 a month. I have $200 a month in positive cash flow. I hear a few landlords in the room. I see some heads shaking. You have to understand, you are not buying a house if you're a buy and hold investor. You are buying a business represented by sticks and bricks that someone else lives in and pays you rent for. So you need to come into this thing thinking of it as a business. It has revenue from rents coming in. It has expenses, and those do include your mortgage payment and your taxes and your insurance, but they also include sometimes tenants move out, and the odds are very high, if not almost always in Austin, Texas, you don't have somebody moving in the next day, and you don't miss a beat or a day of rent. And when you have those turnovers, you have expenses, and even when you have a tenant that lives in the property for 10 years, toilets break, hot water heaters only have a certain useful life to them, and air conditioners need to be serviced. And that's just the scratching the surface. So when you guys were talking earlier, you talked about appreciation is your name of the game. My guess from your reaction to my first thing is your cash flow in your mind is your reserves for repairs and vacancy and leasing commissions if you have to pay them and things like that. Your long game, your big goal is appreciation over a long period of time, and you're factoring in whatever technical cash flow you have to cover operating expenses. I'm 100% cool with that game. If you can also buy it where, in addition to that, it throws off a a little extra, then that's great, and that's a win-win. Number two, and I know we have a gentleman in the room that will agree with me on this, Mr. Jennings, who owns the Rekeep company, Texas Rekeep. Landlords, many of them, and even many licensed agents don't understand the Texas property code and the locks and security devices that you are required by state law to provide for your tenant. So you either need to work with a professional property management company, an agent that knows what they're doing, and or hire Texas Rekeep to do your rekeying of your locks and making sure you have the keyless deadbolts and the peepholes and your smoke detectors are working and all that kind of stuff when you change over tenants. Because trust me, you don't want to find out the hard way that that's a requirement in Texas law, and oops, I didn't know. Number three, improper or a complete lack of tenant screening. Because you like the person and they, when you show them the house, they, their cologne smells good, or they're from your hometown, or something that, made some connection and you feel good about them, and therefore you lease to them. You need to be verifying employment, income, rental history, credit, criminal background check, eviction history, all that kind of stuff. There are companies that will do that for you for a fee, and you don't have to do it. You can use National Tenant Network will run credit checks and criminal backgrounds, and they'll look for eviction histories, and they have their own scoring model that they'll use to give you a recommendation on whether or not to lease to that tenant. But don't just put them in there because they seem like a nice person. National Tenant Network, I've used them in the past. There are similar services as well, and the agents or management companies that you work with, they have different systems that they use to screen their tenants as well. But you do want to make sure that you do a thorough check on who you're putting into that property. Number four, a failure to understand and abide by fair housing laws at both the national and local level. I have talked to numerous landlords or would-be landlords who don't want to rent to students. Well, guess what? If you're in the city of Austin, status as a student is a protected class under fair housing law at the city ordinance level. What does that mean? Does that mean I have to lease to every student who fills out an application? No. They still have to qualify, but if you've got a student that works full-time or even works part-time but makes enough money to meet your qualifying standards, and they have rental history and they have good credit and they're not a criminal, guess what? It's too bad they're a student. If they apply and they meet your criteria, guess what? You need to approve that application, because otherwise you're discriminating against them based on the fact that they're a student. Sexual orientation is another local ordinance, fair housing, protected class in the city of Austin that may not be the same in Fort Worth or Amarillo or El Paso. So you need to know not only race and national origin and family status and handicap and things that apply nationwide, you also need to know what happens in your local jurisdiction. Number 5 is using leases from the internet, Office Depot, and other sources that are not written to comply with Texas law, or not having a lease at all. You need a good lease, and there are 2 main ones that I have used in the past that I highly recommend. The Texas Association of Realtors lease is a good lease, and any realtor that you want to work with can help you and give you access to use that form. and the other is the Texas Apartment Association lease. Both of those organizations spend very expensive lawyer man time and money on being up to date with changes in legislation every 2 years after we have a legislative session, and making sure that the lease complies with the law and gives you the ability to do the things you need to do to protect yourself and your property and to protect your tenants. So please, if you're going to do this on your own, that's great, that's fine, no problem, but use a good lease that understands and is written to comply with Texas law. Number 6 is errors in tax reporting, like not sending 1099s to vendors and contractors. So if someone comes and does plumbing work on your property and replaces your water heater, and it's an $800 expense, and they are Joe's Plumbing, the sole proprietor plumbing company, guess what? At the end of the year, you have to file a 1099. You have to mail it to Joe, so you have to have gotten his tax ID number and his mailing address, and then you have to report that through your returns and filings with the IRS so that those numbers match up. So you do need to understand the vendors and contractors that you use, you have tax reporting things that you need to do. Number 7 is failing to comply with laws regarding reconciliation and return of security deposits. So I know I have some landlords in the room. For those of you who know the answer to this question, or you are certain that you know the answer to the question, let's see if we can have somebody that has a good educated yes. How long do you have to reconcile and or return the tenant security deposit after they move out? 30 days. And you need to know that that's 30 days, assuming that they have given you a forwarding address, that they have turned in keys and given possession of the property. There's certain things that they have to do on their end to trigger that timeline, and that timeline may trigger before the actual end of the lease if they comply with all of these things. If you get beyond the 30 days, guess what happens? They can get you not only for what you withheld, but also a $100 penalty and up to 3 times the amount that you withheld or didn't return in a timely fashion. So it becomes very expensive if you don't understand and don't comply with that Texas property code. Yes.
What remedy does the tenant have to get that money? I mean, that's the law. How do they get that money?
Well, they're going to have to come. They're going to have to come after you for it, and they're going to have to do that through a legal proceeding. I'm sure it's probably a small claims court kind of thing, depending on the size of the deposit and that sort of thing. But they can, if they can document that you were late in doing it, then they have legal recourse to come after you. And the law, I mean, it is black and white, spelled out, plain as day, what you're. Oh my. Yeah. I'm not an attorney, but it sounds like she has cause to go out. Number 8 is similarly related. It's charging tenants for things that are legally the responsibility of the landlord. You have to provide hot water for your tenants. Believe it or not, you don't have to provide air conditioning by the letter of the law, but you have to provide hot water. You have to repair things that materially affect the health and welfare of an ordinary tenant. So you cannot require that tenants make every repair in your property. You can require them to make some, or you can require them to pay a certain amount of certain repairs, but there are things that you're legally required to do as a landlord, so you need to understand those so that you don't violate those laws. Number 9 is trusting the tenant to pay when they're late and delaying your eviction filing. I'll have it there next Friday, I promise. This is where you get in trouble for being a nice person and believing what people say. And I'm not saying that everybody's a liar, but there are a certain percentage of people out there who are either lying or they're so far in denial that they don't understand how bad their financial situation is. I have sent tenants Dave Ramsey's personal financial books from Amazon in an effort to try to help them. I'm like, I'll spend $20 on a book. If you'll please just tell me you'll read it and learn how to do a budget and manage and pay your bills. And the last one is not using the right resources for rent comps and for leasing and renewals. There are a lot of services out there that you can use for free to get some information on what rents are in a particular area. There's a rent-o-meter or something like that, and things like Zillow and Truly and things like that can give you some ideas. But when it comes time to making a pricing decision, you really need to talk to somebody who has access to the MLS and who's actively in the business doing things. We got a client referred to us from an apartment locator, and they told me what they were listing her property for. And I was like, oh, great. They're going to list it for lease for $2,500, and we'll take over the management. It sounds like a really nice house. Well, it is a very nice house, don't get me wrong. But it's a $1,500 house, not a $2,500 house. And so it sat on the market, and they reduced it, and reduced it, and reduced it, and reduced it, and they got down to like $1,700, and then she got tired of dealing with them, and she said, I'm just going to let you guys lease it as well. And I said, that's fine, but this is what it's worth. It's what it was worth 3 months ago when you put it on the market, and they should have told you that, or you should have listened if they did tell you that. So make sure you're getting good comps, just like you would when you're trying to sell a property, when you do your leasing and when you do your renewals. And I've got 100 copies of my list on our table back there. If you'd like to take it with you, jot down a few notes. I'm sure I'll touch on some of these topics next month as well. So